We are live. Could I just have a chumash, please? We got lots of people here in person. Okay. I'd like to discuss with you tonight an idea. Let's just turn this down. I'd like to discuss with you tonight an idea that I had yesterday. I shared this with a few people in the seminary here in the Manchester Sem, and I think it's a part of it is an old idea, but part of it is a new bit, or it's a lot of it's sort of an older idea. But I put it all together yesterday, and I think I actually think it's quite an interesting idea. Okay, so let's start on the following. The Torah tells us we are in Parasha Chukas. If you are looking in the Art School Chumash, you're looking at page 842. Hey, Daniel. The entire nation came to Midbatzin on the first month. This is in the month of Nisan. They were in Kodesh, and Miriam dies there, and she was buried there. Later, there was nothing to drink, and they come up to Moshe Rabbeinu and to Aaron, and they have an argument with Moshe Rabbeinu. Says, "What we wish we would have died when our fathers died in Midbar. Why did you bring us to this place? What are we to bring us out of Egypt for? We're going to die here, etc., etc." There's a whole long story. And then we know what the next bit is. This is the famous story of the Mei Meriva. So Hashem says to Moshe, this is in verse 7 and 8, Hashem says to Moshe, saying, "Take the stick, gather together the Jewish people, you and Aaron, your brother, and you should speak to the rock in front of them, and it will give its waters, and you should bring out water from this rock, and you should give them to drink, them and their flock." And Moshe takes the stick, and as it was commanded, and he gathers together the people, him and Aaron gather together people to the rock, and he says to them, "Shimona Hamorim, listen, you rebellious ones. Do you think I'm going to bring out of this rock, am I going to bring out water?" And Moshe Rabbeinu lifts up his stick, and he hits the rock, and a lot of water comes out, and they all drink. And Hashem says to Moshe, because you didn't believe in me, like so to sanctify me in the eyes of an Yisrael, you will not be able to bring this congregation to the land as I given to them. These are known as the Mei Meriva, the waters of argument, or the waters of strife. So this is what the Torah tells us. This is the story. So we all know there's a lot of discussion amongst the Rishonim. There's a lot of discussion. What is it that Moshe Rabbeinu did wrong? What was so terrible? So we know Rashi's famous comment is that Rashi says, what did they do? What were they supposed to? What did they do? They were supposed to. And instead they're supposed to speak to the rock, and instead they hit the rock. And therefore, they deserved a punishment. Let me ask you a question. Is there such a big difference between speaking to the rock and hitting the rock? I mean, what's the difference? Right? And even if there is a difference, part 2 of this is. So let's assume there is a massive difference between speaking to the rock and hitting the rock. Does that deserve the amount of punishment that Moshe Rabbeinu received here? I mean, if you think about it, what did Moshe Rabbeinu... Yeah, Roger, you're about to say something.
No, I was just going to... I would say, yes, it's a very big deal if you disobey Ribbon Shalom.
Oh, 100%. Anytime you disobey Ribbon Shalom, it's a big deal.
And the bar set very high for Moses as well.
And the bar set very high, exactly. Well, so we're going to come back to all of that, but I want to add another idea to it. So yes, obviously it's always a big deal, right? But it seems, even though of course it's a big deal, and of course Moshe Rabbeinu shouldn't have done it, it seems almost that the punishment is, if we could say it, too harsh. It seems a very, very harsh punishment for something where you'd say, well, God wanted him to speak to the rock. Well, what's the difference between speaking to the rock and hitting the rock? Where does the difference lie?
It's hitting an emotional thing, so he's maybe gets annoyed or he's frustrated, rather than just speaking. Okay,
so there is that within the Rishonim as well. There are those that say that Moshe Rabbeinu was punished because he said, "Shimona Hamorim, listen, you rebellious ones," and that was Moshe Rabbeinu's lashing out at the Jewish people. And it's amazing because you think about it, Moshe Rabbeinu has kept calm almost his entire life. He's kept calm. He's never once lashed out at the Jewish people. One time he lashes out at the Jewish people and he gets it over the head. Anybody who's had any position of importance, or a position in rabbinics, or a position in leadership, or whatever else it might be, will know one time is one time too many. Imagine if David Cameron gets heckled, or Theresa May, or Jeremy Corbyn, whoever they might be. And they get heckled. And for whatever reason, when they get heckled, in general, most people, when they get heckled, they're okay. Especially politicians, they're trained to keep quiet. Let's say for once, hopefully, Jeremy Corbyn loses his patience and absolutely wipes the floor with him, cursing at him and saying all sorts of obscenities and. What would happen? What would happen? He lose all credibility. What do you mean you lose all credibility? One time, do you know what the guy said to me? And one time I've lost my patience. One time, what's the big deal? The answer is, even one time is a big deal. When you're the leader, even once is once too many. Right? Hi, Phil. Come on in. When you're the leader, even once is once too many. Can we just move one down? There's one more seat there. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't get a second chance. If you were to look at it like that. He lost his patience. How are you going to be in the video if you sit here? Or are you just getting a chumash? I thought you were going to sit here. Be waving behind me. Yeah. Making faces. So see, everyone is laughing on the video and you can't figure out why they're laughing. In the meantime, I was making faces at me behind me. Okay, so that's the first thing. So you can understand that sometimes, and that's true of what you said before. We set the bar very high. For certain people, the bar set very high, and even HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for certain people, sets the bar very high. Moshe Rabbeinu had the bar set very, very high, so that if you fail to make it to that level, you still get punished, even though you might think, well, what's the big deal? Maybe you and I might think, what's the big deal? So the Malbim gives a brilliant comment. Now, I've not looked through the entire Malbim again, because the Malbim speaks about the difference between an Eben and a Sela, because he always does these kind of things. The Malbim will tell you the differences between words and synonyms, and different things, words that sound similar but aren't similar, but are they similar, etc., etc. However, this is the story that we read about with Malbim. Says Malbim, you have to realize and you have to understand that Moshe Rabbeinu had a very, very big chance here. Meaning, there are two types of wells. There's a natural well, and there's a miraculous well. What's the difference between a natural well and a miraculous well? A natural well, there's no miracle involved in bringing out water from a natural well. So let's say for whatever, let's make this up. Let's say I knew behind here there was a natural well, right? And I knew all I had to do is pull out this farm from here, move over the farm case, and water would come out. Naturally, because there's a spring below it, and this farm case has just been sitting on it, covering the spring. If I were to move that svarim case over, would there be any great miracle in the water coming forth from there? No. What have I done? I've just opened up. It's like walking over to the tap. Anybody who's never seen a tap before, so you read those stories about having invited primitive people into first world countries, and you walk over to the wall and you turn on the tap and the water comes out. They can't believe it. And they said, well, what would you like? I'd like one of those to take home. So I took home the sink together with the tap, and they said to the people in their village, from now on, we've solved all issues. We won't have to go down to the well anymore. We won't have to do anything. What are you going to do? Watch this. And he turns the tap and nothing comes. And they're like, what was that all about? Why? He says, I don't understand. So he calls back up to the White House and he says, I don't understand. He says, you have to be connected to a chain of underground pipes and water supply, et cetera, et cetera. You can't just turn a tap and expect water to come out, right? But if I had a tap on the side of my nose over here and I went like this and water came out and I would have liters and liters and liters of water coming out, I could feed and drink in everybody to drink that I wanted to, you'd probably say that's a pretty impressive trick, isn't it? That's pretty much a miracle. Yeah. There's no miracle of walking over to the wall and turning on the tap because I've connected the pipes to the mains, and the mains are connected to the greater mains out on the road, and it's great. We have running water, and we've had it here for many, many years in this country. It's not a miracle. Moshe Rabbeinu has a chance over here. He can do one of two things. Either he can prove to the Jewish people that he's making a miracle with the water. Alternatively, he can have the Jewish people under the illusion that there was no miracle here whatsoever. There was an underground spring that Moshe Rabbeinu knew exactly where to locate. And all Moshe Rabbeinu did was what? Remove the stone that was above it, blocking the spring. As soon as you remove the stone, what happens? Water comes out. Is that a miracle? No. That's just a natural occurrence. There's no great miracle to be seen in this. So Moshe Rabbeinu has a chance now. He can choose to do one of two things. Either he can speak to the rock. Now, if I walked over to my tap that I was speaking to you about before, and I said, "Oh, great and mighty tap, I command you to give forth your waters," and water comes out, you'd be suitably impressed, probably. If I did this and I turned on the tap, there'd be nothing impressive in that, right? So Moshe Rabbeinu has a chance now. He walks over to this rock and he can say one of two things. He can either say to the rock, "Give forth your waters," and the rock gives forth his waters, in which instance, what has he done? He's proven to the Jewish people that God has taken a rock that actually has no water in it whatsoever, and he's made water come forth. Created a massive miracle for the Jewish people. Alternatively, he can do one other thing. What else could he do? He can bang it with a stick, right? What happens when he bangs it with a stick? He moves the rocks, and then what happens? Water comes out. What do the people that see it think? What has he done? He's just uncovered a natural spring. There's not been a miracle here at all. All he's done is he knew where the natural spring was, and he's removed the barrier, and now the natural spring gives water. That's not a very great trick. That's not a great trick at all. So Moshe Rabbeinu had the chance here to create a tremendous Kiddush Hashem in showing the Jewish people that there's no natural water source here. This is the miracle of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that has given them this source of water. That's his chance. That's his chance. What did he do? He hit the rock, thereby creating the illusion that there was no miracle here whatsoever, and that Moshe Rabbeinu had just found an underwater spring, removed the cover, and now gave forth its water. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu deserves to get punished. Okay? That's just to understand Rashi. If you want to understand Rashi, when you see Rashi says, he spoke to the rock, he hit the rock, he didn't speak to the rock. And we're like, okay, but give me a better explanation than that. Please explain it that a little bit better so that I understand it. The answer is, it's not only speaking to the rock as opposed to hitting the rock. It's the difference between the Jewish people thinking that you have a miracle and the Jewish people thinking that you have a natural occurrence. And that's why Hashem says, Yan lo emanti bi like the sheini le'nei bnei Yisrael. You had a chance to do a Kiddush Hashem. Why? What's the Kiddush Hashem? Because instead of think there was just a natural flow of water, you had the chance to let everybody know this was a miracle. And you didn't. And for that, Moshe Rabbeinu deserves to be punished. Okay? Yeah, go on.
He was a very level-headed guy.
Yeah.
So why would he do it?
Okay, it's a good question. It seems that Moshe Rabbeinu, it would seem that Moshe Rabbeinu lost his patience a bit with the Jewish people. Or the way Rashi says a few things. Rashi says that the first time he spoke to it and it didn't work, and then he realized it just wasn't going and it was getting a little bit more complicated. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu did that. So there are different ways of understanding why he did this. But I think there's a very important point that I want to make here as well about the punishment. And I think that this story, I link it together with Chukas, because what does it mean, Zos Chukas HaTorah? God gives us a commandment, and he says, this is the ununderstandable law, or inunderstandable law, whatever the word is. Shmuley, you know English better than I do. Is it ununderstandable or inunderstandable?
Non-understandable.
Non-understandable.
Not understandable.
I don't know. We'd have to look. Well, my computer is sitting on my dictionary over here. If you know it, in the audience, you're very welcome to tell me what the correct word is. We could Google it later. Either way, this is the law that you will not understand. Why does Hashem give laws, pardon?
Usually say incomprehensible.
Incomprehensible.
Much better.
You just move away from that
Yeah,
that
a
verb, and you
word,
just
yeah.
you move away from the verb, and you just say,
Good idea.
we call it incomprehensible.
Yes.
That's very good. So this is the incomprehensible law of the Torah. Why does God give incomprehensible laws? It sounds a very strange thing to do. And then tell us, by the way, I'm giving you a law, and don't even think you can understand it, because you're not going to understand it. Because God wants us to realize there are certain things in life that we will never understand. And as much as we try and as much as we think we'll understand it, we will not be able to understand it. Right? So therefore, God gives you a mitzvah and he says, I'm telling you now, you can try to understand it, you won't get it. And even if you think you got it, you won't get it. And it's important for us as human beings to know that we don't understand everything. And I move on, and therefore I spoke about this yesterday, and this was the idea that I had. I remember, now we come back to this story. This story comes right after the story of, or right after the Parasha about the red heifer, which is the incomprehensible law. And we read this story, and we say, well, there seems to be some form of connection between this incomprehensible law and the next Parasha has to do with the waters, the Mei Meriva. What is the connection between the two of them? And I think the connection is as follows. When it comes to understanding punishment, it is for us incomprehensible. It's not something we can understand. It's not something we're meant to understand. And even more than that, and this is the story I told them yesterday, and I'd like to tell you as well, I believe it's not something that we can understand. So let me give you an example. Okay? I remember 7 years ago, there was a member of our shul that was very ill, deathly ill. And I was asked by the family to come visit him, and I came to visit him, and I came to his house, and he was lying in his bed, upstairs in his bedroom, very unwell. And we schmoozed. And after a while, he looks at me and he says, Rabbi, I want to ask you a question. Why is God doing this to me? What did I do wrong? Why is God punishing me like this? What do you think? Good question. I think it's a good question. I think anybody who's going through suffering who doesn't ask themselves that question is fooling themselves. Of course, that's a good question. And I thought for a while, and I said, okay, well, what am I going to say to him? And in the end, I said the following, and I believe this to be very, very true. We, as human beings, are not very good with brutal honesty. Let's be honest about it. So the example I gave yesterday, that doesn't really make a difference what the example is that you gave. Whatever, I'll choose an example. I'll choose this is, I remember I once spoke about this in shul, and then somebody disagreed with me, but let's discuss it anyway. We had to write a paper at the end of my university studies. I had to write a paper. Our final paper was to write a business plan, and we wrote a business plan. We had a business which was quite simple, and we wrote a business plan which was much longer than we wanted it to be, but we were given all these different things. You have to fill out market conditions, you have to fill out this, and you have to fill out R&D, and you have to fill out all these parts. And so basically we had to write this business plan for a product that existed already that we wanted to import into Israel. And the benefits of it were pretty simple and straightforward. And we were stuck, basically, having to write 20 pages of quite repetitive material because the professors in university had told us these are the sections that need to be in there. And whether we liked it or whether we didn't, it still needs to be in there. Okay? Now, we wrote our business plan, and our business plan was, okay, let's be honest about it, wasn't the greatest business plan. It was written with not enough thought put into it and not enough work put into it, and it wasn't a great business plan. But we sent it off, and we received it back. And the mark we got on it, Roger used to mark. Did you not used to mark papers?
Thousands of them.
Thousands of them.
Yes.
Ian. Thousands of them. And we received it back. I don't know if you've ever done this. We received it back, and the mark on it was a 43 with about 3 pages of comments. And it was it was very, very annoying and very, it's a very disheartening to get this sort of 3-page absolute hammering of our paper. You didn't do this, you didn't do that, this is wrong, that is wrong, and to top it off, the grade that we received was awful. And you looked at it and you were like, come on, you didn't have to be that nasty, did you? But then I read through it again and I realized, we had made a lot of mistakes. We had left certain things out, we had not included certain things. We changed it around, we ended up passing the paper, just. But forgetting about that, we just about made it above 65. They gave us like a 70, a 65 or 70 on the paper, just about passed it, said, go. Don't want to hear from you anymore. But when you got that 3 pages of corrections, it was harsh. It's hard to take it because if you've invested so much time and effort into this paper, it's very difficult to then hear all the negative things about it. And if you were to take, I know, Roger, you're looking at me with that face, have you had to do that? Or do you sometimes just send back, maybe try again. This wasn't a good...
I'm a 3-page man.
Are you a 3-page man? Oh, very good, But I'm sure your students don't love those 3 pages, do they? It's very hard. I don't blame you for writing the 3 pages, because if the paper is not up to scratch, you don't have a choice but to write those 3 pages. Right?
You've got the 3 diplomatic pages.
Okay, maybe it'll be 3 diplomatic pages. But it is difficult. And it's not only that, anything you do, anything you are, if people are going to be honest with you, if you walked into shul and you weren't feeling well, and somebody walked over to you and said, gee, what happened to you? You look like the Malach HaMavis is walking right behind you. The angel of death is following you around. You'd be like, excuse me? I'm just saying, you look like you're about to collapse. Maybe you should go home. You look like you go to bed, come back in 3 days or something. You wouldn't be very happy, even if you looked awful. You never like to be told you look awful. My mother once told me that she went to visit somebody ill with a friend of hers. And she said she looked at the woman who was ill and it was making her ill to see the woman. And her friend who had visited people even more often than she had walked in, she go, Mrs. So-and-so, you look fantastic. How are you today? And it rolled off her tongue. Do you know why? Because even though she looks awful, no one wants to know they look awful. Nobody really wants to hear the truth. People really want to hear the truth about themselves. Nobody likes to hear the absolute truth about themselves. It's very, very difficult to hear. It's insulting. It grates at us. And so therefore, we like to, even if somebody has to tell us the truth, how do they have to tell us the truth? If somebody would tell you the truth, what do you want from them? Nice. Be nice about it. Imagine your wife went out and bought herself something, and she came home and you think it looks like a curtain. Yeah? You just think it's awful. The worst thing you've seen in a long time. You have 2 choices. You can be honest, right? Or you can be diplomatic. Which one of the 2 is the better choice? Diplomacy. Why? Does your wife not appreciate honesty? Does she not want to hear your opinion? Honey, if you're going to walk out like that, you look like a cleaning lady. You look like you're wearing drapes. Just don't do it. Please do me a favor. Return that back to the shop. Bring back the money. Try again. Okay? Let's try a different shop. Let's try a different dress. Try something else. This is just awful. Is it that bad? It's worse than anything I've ever seen you in. It makes you look fat. It makes you look bloated. The color doesn't suit you. It's an awful cut. It's an awful dress. Just bring it back. Yeah? Have you ever tried that at home?
I wouldn't dare.
You wouldn't dare, yeah? We all wouldn't dare. Why not? Why wouldn't you dare?
You take no notice of me anyway.
That's not why, Alan. Come on, be honest, Alan. Ian, that's not true, right?
Because you want the meals the next day.
The meals, you just, here's the door. You can take it home. Make sure you can take it back to the shop. Make sure you don't come back for another 6 hours.
Or 6 years.
Yeah, or 6 years. But I'm just telling her the truth. What's the answer? We don't really want to hear the truth like that. That's not what we really want to hear. And therefore, Daniel Hammerger wants to know if that was a diplomatic approach.
Yeah.
You don't even know what I say at home, you know? And therefore, if we can't handle the truth about clothing that we've bought, or about a job that we've done on a silly paper, imagine how much less we could handle the truth on something as important as reward and punishment. Imagine, let's say, well, for whatever reason, I give you another example. For whatever reason, you've been slacking off at your job, and your boss comes to you and he's giving you one warning, he's giving you another warning, and not happened, and you have to let go of someone that's working for you. Have you had to do that, Alan?
No.
You never had to do that, Michael?
Yeah.
It's not easy. Not nice to have to let go of people. It's very difficult.
Only once it was pinching from the other girls.
Right. Okay. That's stealing, not pinching. Pinching. I don't want to talk about that. We're not talking about harassment. We're talking about stealing here, please. Yeah. Not that kind of pinching, right?
She was from a good family, a Jewish family.
It doesn't matter. Sadly, we also pinch from people. Yeah, sadly. We're not immune to that. So you have to get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
When you get rid of someone, you tell them, I'm really sorry, but we're going to have to let you go. What do they almost always say, invariably?
Why?
Exactly. Why? What do you then say to them?
You know why.
Oh, that's very good. I like that. I like that, Alan. That's the diplomatic approach.
And they then say, it wasn't me.
They say,
it wasn't me.
You know why?
Because we left stuff out, and the girls left stuff in the bags, and it had gone.
And I'd gone, okay. If that was, if it's as simple as that. Not always can you say, you know why, right? You'll say, why? You've been coming late to work. Everybody else comes late to work. No, they don't. Yes, they do. So-and-so came 10 minutes late yesterday. Somebody else came 20 minutes late the day before. Why are you picking on me? Your work's not been up to scratch. I've been working just fine. I've been putting in a lot of hours. You don't appreciate the work that I put in. Have you had that kind of conversation, or did it not go like that? Did they not try to defend themselves?
Yeah, I just now leave it to the practice manager.
Oh, is it easier?
Yeah.
It is easier if you leave it to somebody else to do.
I delegate that.
You delegate that. It's not a nice conversation to have. And do people almost always invariably say that your allegations aren't 100% correct? And that they're not, or even if the allegations are correct, they don't warrant dismissal. You're right, yes, I've come late, but you have to fire me because of that. I'll try to come on time. I've asked you now for the last 3 years to come on time. Okay, but give me one more chance. Yeah, all these things that they say, we don't do well with that kind of thing. Imagine if HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you, and we can make this up, but if you got an answer from Hashem said, you get punished with X, whatever it is. And you could have a crystal ball, or you could have a direct email to God@gmail.com. And you send an email to God@gmail.com, dear God, I've been diagnosed with X, Y, and Z, and I want to know why. And this email address goes directly to God, and you get a response. And God gives you a response, and He says, because you've not been coming to davening often enough, or you've not been learning properly, or you've been talking Lashon Hara, or fill in the blank with whatever you want to. Right? What would you say if you got that email back?
It would be a miracle.
That's true. It would be a miracle. But how would you feel if you read that? If you saw, I'm being punished because I've spoken Lashon Hara one too many times. Do you know what I would feel? I'll look around and say, do you know what? I know lots more people that speak a lot more Lashon Hara than I do. And they don't have my tzaras. You're picking on me. I know a lot of people that don't daven as often as I do. And they don't have any tzaras. And you're unhappy. I missed davening 3 times last week. Okay, I know people that missed davening 10 times last week. 20 times last week, for that matter. I know people that haven't davened in years. And you're punishing me? How's that fair? And what's God going to say to that? That's how I see it. Yeah? Are you going to be happy with that? No, probably not. Is there going to be anything you can do with that to make yourself happy with it? Not really. Because the honesty of it is something that we as human beings will have a very hard time dealing with. We won't be able to turn around and go, oh, it's Lashon Hara. That's so simple. Of course. God, I deserve that. You're great. I'm nothing. I'm nobody. I shouldn't have challenged. I shouldn't even ask the question. Few and far in between will be that one individual that you will find that will raise his hands up and say, you're right, I'm wrong. We as human beings, we're going to find 1,000,001 people that did exactly the same as we did, and even worse, and say, that's not fair. And so therefore, when it comes to punishment, and it comes to understanding punishments, and why God punishes or why God doesn't punish, God says, you know what? It's beyond you. You'll never understand it. And even if I gave you the answer to it, you still wouldn't be happy with my answer. You still wouldn't understand it. You wouldn't accept it and say, this is great. I'm so happy you've given me this answer. I now have the answer to my existential question. And from now on, I'm not going to ask any more questions. You just feel you got a raw deal. That's what happens. That's what we feel. We often feel we get a raw deal from lots of people. So therefore, and this comes right after Parasha Chukas, we don't understand God's system of giving mitzvahs, and it moves on to the next thing. We don't understand God's system of giving punishments. And what seems fair or unfair to us is a very subjective fair or unfair. We can't really judge. We don't really know what is fair, what's not fair.
Is it wrong to try to understand?
No, it's not wrong to try to understand. It's not. But in the end of the day, even once you do understand, you're only guessing. You'll never truly know. Right? Why did something happen? You can only guess and say, I could blame this. And maybe it was, and maybe it wasn't. And if it makes sense to you and you can get some form of inspiration from it, why not? And if it doesn't make sense to you, so it won't make sense to you. But there's nothing wrong with guessing. I just find that when we guess, we're just doing just exactly that. We're just guessing.
Are all our attempts to understand just a matter of random guessing?
I would have thought so.
Well, isn't that a waste of time?
It might be, but I think people want to have an understanding and want to have a feeling that they're not being picked on. So therefore, they would rather try to figure out why this is happening to them and understand it, rather than just go, well, God knows what he's doing. People feel a lot better if they could give a reason to it. And therefore, you're right. We can try to understand. We can try to see why certain things happen. I know certain things that happen in my life that I look back upon and I say at the time I didn't know why they happened. Now I look back and I can see the blessing in what happened. But I still can't say that that is why it happened. I can only say I now, in hindsight, can see a great positive side within it. But it's still not necessarily the reason it happened. Just the positive that came from it is not necessarily the reason why the negative happened. It could be.
So it's not totally random. We might get some sort of inkling of what's going on.
Pardon?
So our attempts to understand aren't just totally random.
No, they won't be totally random, because I think in the end of the day, you can see certain things. So I'll give you an example. Somebody recently told me that they had an argument about a Yerusha many, many years ago. And they were very upset at the time. And now they look back at the argument and they say if they had gotten the Yerusha then, that money would be long gone. They need the money now. Oh, I'll give you a better example. This is a guy said to me. A guy told me recently, he said he's a solicitor, a barrister, and he did a lot of work for someone, and he was owed 50 or 60,000 pounds by this client. And he was in the midst of going through a very messy divorce, and he was trying to get his money, and to no avail. For 2 years he tried to get his money and he didn't get it. And he got divorced, and that was it, and they split up. And suddenly, a year after the divorce, he gets an email saying, "Dear Mr. So-and-so, I'm really sorry we couldn't give you the money at the time. We've now been able to come up with the money. I'm going to send you a payment." And within 3 days, he had a back payment to his account. He got his money. And he said at the time, it was one of the most stressful, frustrating things in the world, where I said to God, I said, God, it's not bad enough that I'm getting divorced. It's not bad enough that I'm skint. Here's a guy that owes me 50,000 pounds. Why don't you allow him to pay me? He says, afterwards, I look back and I said, that 50,000 pounds that I got 2 years down the line helped me rebuild my life, helped me rebuild my practice. And had I had it then, it would have gone on legal fees, and half of it would have gone to my wife. Now I got the entire amount to myself, and I was able to rebuild my entire life based on that 50,000 pounds that windfall that I got 2-3 years later. Says at the time, I was really, really upset. I didn't get the money. 3 years down the line, I was ecstatic. I didn't get that money. Baruch Hashem, I didn't get that money. Because had I had the money then, it would be long gone. Today I have money. Today I have a life. I have a place to live. I have a job. I have stability because for 2 years I didn't get that money.
You are manipulating a reason, aren't you?
That's what I'm saying. So, is that why he didn't get his money at the time?
Because if he got the money, his life could have gone in a totally different direction.
Correct.
So
correct.
You can't really say that.
No, you can't really say that. You can't really know that. I was like, and is that the reason why God didn't give him the money at the time? We don't know. We can say now in hindsight, it's been a good turn as well. We're not going to call it a negative thing, but we can say, but I know for certain why he didn't get his money then, because God wanted him to have the money 3 years later. I don't know that for certain, right? That's a nice way of seeing it. It's a happy ending to a story that sounded really awful at the beginning, but it's not the guaranteed reason this happened. So can I find meaning in that? Yes, I can find a lot of meaning in that. Is that the reason? Not necessarily. And I think that's where the difference is. You can find meaning in something even if it's not the definitive reason. But you can still look back and say, you know what? Hashem knows exactly what he's doing. And therefore, he's done me a very good turn now, because if I had the money then, chances are, I can't be sure, but chances are I would have zero of it now. Today I have this money. I've rebuilt my life with it. Thank you, Hashem.
If you look back, you can see a pattern sometimes.
That's right. That's right. So if you look back and you see a pattern, you can say, okay, I see that pattern, and that's a beautiful thing. That Kodesh Baruch Hu has done this for me. He's created this pattern to allow me to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And that pattern, again, goes back to what I said before. It gives meaning to the suffering that I had before. And therefore, it is not for naught just to start looking for that pattern. But you cannot get too fixated on that pattern and decide for yourself, that pattern must be the reason that God did this for me. It doesn't have to be the reason God did this for you. It could be
an apparent pattern, isn't it?
It isn't even in this case. It was an apparent pattern, because in this case, the guy said 2 years later when I got the money, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Right? There's an apparent pattern over there. Is that why Hashem did it to him? I don't know. But the fellow now, at least, he looks back and he says, for me, I'm happy enough to look at it in that way and to say, God spared me that money then and gave it to me at a much later date, which is when I really needed it. Is that why God did it? I don't know. But it makes him feel happy. So great. So go for it. If you're happier looking at it like that and it gives you a feeling of God's looking after me, then God says, that's great. Is that why it happened? Maybe. But it's not definitely why it happened. So I don't think, to come back, it says, there are no answers. Sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't answers. But I think even if we have no definitive answers, to look for that pattern and to look for that meaning and to try to understand and to try to make that part of who you are and to at least get some form of solace in the fact that you can try to understand it, or you can try to see the positive in it as well. That's also a great thing. And therefore we have over here, I think this Parasha Moshe Rabbeinu teaches us a very great thing, that not only are mitzvahs incomprehensible, life is incomprehensible. And God's way of justice is incomprehensible to us. But not because we're so much cleverer than God is. We don't have the full overview. Sometimes looking back, we can see some kind of pattern and we can understand it. We can say, maybe that gives it a lot more meaning. Maybe. Not necessarily, but maybe. But even that is just guesswork. It's not guaranteed. It's not for sure the reason why. But it's important. And so therefore we go with it. Right. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Thank you everybody who joined me live. Please share this video so that other people can enjoy it as well. Thank you.
Just to make another point.
Yeah.
Coming back to this